Hello and welcome to this video on making flavoured spirits. Flavoured spirits are distinct from vodka and other similar white spirits in many ways. The most obvious is the associated strong flavour and odour. If you're starting to make flavoured spirits, then vodka is your easiest option to start with. Vodka is the most neutral alcohol base and can be flavoured with very strong additions. Think limoncello or chocolate. This process is like creating a cocktail without the hassle of creating a cocktail. That is another reason to use a very simple flavour base. The more complex the flavour, the harder it is to combine with others. This means things that aren't as simple as vodka can be difficult to blend appropriately. On the other hand, you will need to look at using some of the fresh ingredients and often very strongly flavoured ones. Use the best quality and freshest ingredients that you can get. A good point to remember by contrast with this is that you do not need to use the best spirit bases for your concoction, simply because the flavours you're going to be relying on are going to be the most pronounced flavours, as the more subtle, lower end of the flavour spectrum can be overwhelmed very quickly. Those subtle flavours are often what give high-end or more expensive alcohols their high price tag. If you are using a neutral base such as vodka, and we recommend beginning with vodka, you can add herbs and spices initially, and this should be done for less than a day. At the extreme end of the time frame, maybe a week, depending on the softer, more subtle flavors, but not more than that. This is because you'll find that over time it becomes saturated, and any other flavors or aromas in there will be overwhelmed. Your stronger flavors should be infused for a shorter period. Your lighter flavors, particularly those found in fruits and berries that are more aromatic rather than taste-based, can be infused for up to a month. This is simply because the amount you get out of it and the amount that comes into the drink, not the gases that come off of it, is very different, so you'll get a strong smell, but the taste will be very different. Before infusing anything, you need to do some preparation. Initially, with larger things like fruits, vegetables, and flowers, you should try and reduce their size. Peel them, take away the core, anything that's not going to impart the flavor that you want. Then cut them into small sized chunks. Remember, the more surface area, the more the alcohol can penetrate and draw out these flavors that you want. Another thing to consider is that although we advise peeling, you may not want to do that. More often than not, the skin of fruit has the pigmentation or the dye in it, which means if you want to impart color to your infusion, you need to have some in there. On the other hand, it's also where the tannins are often located, which means you might get a bitter or sour flavor. These strong flavors are much more notable in citrus fruits. If you've ever bitten into the rind of a citrus fruit, you'll know that it has a very sour, unpleasant taste. If you're looking at making something like limoncello, where you have whole lemons squished into a large bottle with alcohol added to it, you can see why this needs to be balanced carefully. You don't want to overwhelm whatever it is you're making. On the other end of the spectrum again, so to speak, you have herbs, much lighter but very fragrant and potent material. These need to be cut into small sections again, and often processed in other ways, for example, heating them to release those aromas, or to take away some of those bitter flavors. You may want to crush them, and otherwise make it so that the alcohol can penetrate properly. Now that you have your alcohol base and your additions, you now need to combine them. Combinations will occur in different ways. The most common to start with is a simple 1-to-1 ratio. 1 part addition, 1 part alcohol, by volume. This means 1 cup, for instance, of alcohol and 1 cup of herbs or fruit. Then proceed to mush everything together. You're not trying to make a slurry, but you are trying to break up the structure enough the alcohol can get all the way in. If you've cut or processed your material small enough, this isn't necessary. If it's still quite large and bulky, Putting it in the jar and shaking it will do the same job to an extent. Make sure your jar is sealed and put it away for storage. This is somewhere without natural light and preferably in the cool, dark environment. This will allow those chemical reactions to occur slowly but surely. You will need to take it out daily. Daily testing or tasting will tell you when your infusion is completed. Pour the material into a new container through a filter. A sieve is often good enough as it removes all of the solid material. You may want to use something finer such as cheesecloth if you're concerned about small things getting through the filter. This leaves you with your infused alcohol, and at least in theory, it should be stable. You can keep it for a number of months on an open bench, preferably keeping it in the fridge as that's a cold environment. But storage goes beyond just that. Depending on what you've infused, you'll get different time frames. If you look at a spice or a herb infusion, they will last a very long time. There's not a lot of bacteria or anything else introduced. You're not adding anything like sugars, and therefore the ability to support a pathogen like a bacterium is very small. The alcohol makes it a very inhospitable environment, and this means that there's very little chance of it growing and creating problems. If we look at fruits and similar, that changes. Fruits are often sugar-rich, which would feed the bacteria, and it means you need to be more careful in how you handle it. If it's a properly sealed container, and you've kept it in the cool, dark environment, it shouldn't be too bad and may keep for up to a year. We say may keep up to a year for a very simple reason. That won't always be the case. Depending on how well you've done it, and what sort of material you've used, and how well you've processed that material, it could be substantially shorter. The other noteworthy point is that we strongly suggest the use of amber bottles. As we previously explained, amber bottles reduce the issue of sunlight. UV light can break down some of the aromatic and taste-based compounds that would otherwise be beneficial. When they break down, they can create byproducts that you find aren't going to be appreciated by anyone. This method shares a lot in common with jugging and similar alcohol preservation techniques, and we'll go into detail on those in the future. But for now, just understand the idea here is to take a flavoured spirit base, and it can be more than just vodka. Things like rum, brandy, even certain spirits like gin can be combined very effectively with fruits, flowers, herbs, and spices. It allows you to accentuate flavours, add in interesting tastes, and more, and keep it stored safely and effectively for a long time. This means if you find a recipe that you like, you can actually make a bulk quantity and keep it on hand. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.